In today's video, I'm going to be breaking down and explaining the 6 phonics phases. Hi, my name is Spoma and I'm a primary school teacher here in the UK. If you're just coming across my channel for the very first time, you are welcome. If you are an old-time subscriber, you're absolutely welcome. Now let's dive right into it. Before I go into the explanation, I'd just like to state that I'll be using the letters and sound scheme. So there are different phonics schemes that are out there that schools can decide and choose to use. Now, I know letters and sounds is been phased off or phased out, and now people can decide to choose whatever scheme that they want to use. So you have the little wado, you have the read write ink, then you have letters and sounds, and you also have the twinkle phonics and on and on. But for the purpose of this video and for the particular one that I'm used to, I'll be using letters and sounds. Right. Now, phase 1 phonics, for the letters and sound, there are 7 aspects for the phase 1 phonics, which you can see on the screen in front of you. The very first one is the environmental sound and discrimination. So this is where now in phase 1, you're not teaching any sounds, okay? There are no sounds at all in phase 1. The aim of phase 1 is to begin to train the children on on how to listen for sounds, because they need this skill in order to progress to phase 2 and the other skills and the other phases. If they're not able to hear sounds very well, it'll be difficult for them to be able to blend and segment a word. So phase 1 is all about training them to be able to listen out to sounds and to hear sounds. And ways you can do this is you can use environmental sounds. So maybe you take them out on a ground walk and just let them listen to sounds, what they can hear. And then when they come back to the classroom, you can ask them what they heard and have a conversation about it. You have environmental sounds for aspect 2. So this is where maybe you have different instruments in the classroom. You take it in turns, or the children, and you play the instruments and you ask the children to describe the sound that they hear. What does it sound like and what instrument it is? Then you have the body percussion sound. So this is maybe where you do some clapping and maybe ask the children to repeat after you. And all of that. Then you have the rhythm and rhymes, is where you have your nursery rhymes and your nursery songs and all of that to help in this aspect, to begin to train them to be able to hear sounds. Then you have your alliterations. So this is where you say certain words that have the same sort of beginning letter, and the children copy and all of that. Again, this is just to train them to understand that, okay, it's alliteration because they have similar sounds or similar letters and all of that. Then you have the voice sounds, singing and all of that, reading, where you just read out loud to them and they listen to you read. Again, you're training their listening skills and all of that. Then you have the oral blending and segmenting. So this is where you as a teacher, you maybe read a word out and you blend and segment it without having the children do it. They're just watching you and listening to you as you do that. For instance, we have a word on the board and you blend and segment it in front of the children so they can just see and hear what you are doing. So this is the phase 1 for the letters and sound scheme. And basically, this is what you do, or as a teacher, this is what you need to be aware for the phase 1. Now you have the phase 2, okay? Just going to move this out of the way so I'm not blocking that. You have the phase 2. So now phase 2, this is where you begin to introduce sounds and basically single sounds. And for phase 2, we teach phase 2 sounds in order. So starting with the s, a, t. Okay, so you teach them in order. We're not jumping and skipping sounds. And by the time you're done with the first 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. By the time you're done with the first 8 sounds in phase 1, in phase 2, the children at this point should be able to read basic CVC words, okay? By the time you've gone through the first 8 sounds, they should be able to read a variety of CVC words with that. So here in phase 2, we have the single words, and then we also have some double consonant words here. So these are all the sounds that you teach for phase 2. So for phase 3 sounds, this is where you have the remaining of the single letters, and then you have a few double consonants. And then this is now where you introduce digraphs and trigraphs. So digraphs are where you have two letters that make one sound. For instance, the ch, the sh, the ng, a, e, I, sorry, E. Okay, so these are two letters that make one sound, and they're called digraphs. So this is where you begin to introduce slightly complex sounds. Then you also have the trigraphs. So these are where three letters make one sound. You have the I, G, H. When you put them together, they make one sound, I. Okay, so in phase 3, you introduce the digraphs and the trigraphs, and then it gets a little bit more complex. Then in phase 4 phonics. Now, phase 4, you're not teaching any new sound in phase 4. In phase 4, you're basically focusing on consonant blends and consonant clusters. What do I mean by consonant blends and consonant clusters? This is where you have two consonant words side by side. So you have the N and the K. Okay, the N and the K, these are consonants. When you put them together, you call them consonant blends or consonant cluster. So this is where we focus on, in phase 4, you focus on consonant blends, and also you basically revisit the sounds that you've taught in phase 2 and phase 3 to solidify that learning. So you have for phase 4, we teach the f, you have the bl, you teach the f, gl, the pt, the ilk. Okay, so this is where you begin to introduce those, they're not sounds, sorry. We call them consonant clusters or consonant blends. So this is where we introduce most of this in phase 4, as well as going through previous sounds. Again, you teach every of the phase, you teach them in order. So we don't skip. For example, you don't start teaching from, okay, you don't start teaching from the last one, you start teaching from the very first one, and you move your way down to the last one. Then moving on to phase 5, this is where now you begin to introduce complex sounds. Now, by the time you get to phase 5, majority of the children in your classroom should be able to read fluently. Majority, okay? So there might be some who might still need extra help, but at this point, a lot of them should be able to read common CVC words, CCCV words, and all of that, okay? Now, in phase 5, this is where we begin to introduce alternative sounds. So what do I mean by alternative sounds? For instance, the children would have learned the sound A in phase. They would have learned the sound A in phase 3, right? The A and the I in phase 3. But in phase 5 phonics, as we know, English can be very tricky when it comes to writing. So in phase 5 phonics, you now begin to introduce alternative sounds. So you have the A for the AI, and then you also have the AY, which make the same sound, and you have snail. It's the A. So the AI make the A sound, the AY make the A sound. You also have the A and the E, the A splits E, which also makes the A sound for snake. Okay, so this is where we begin to introduce that and explain to the children that, yes, we've learned most of the sounds, okay? By phase 5, they would have learned most of the sounds. Remember, by the time they get to phase 4, they would have learned most of the sounds. So remember that phase 5 is basically alternative sounds. There are sounds that they already know, but now they begin to understand that because of the complexity of the English language when it comes to writing, that you might have a word that's a sound that sounds the same, but when you write it, which is the grapheme, you write it differently. So when you write play, you write it with AY. Now, some children who have learned up to phase 4 at this point, maybe when they're writing play, they might write the PLAI because it makes the same sound. So this is where, by the time we introduce them to phase 5 sound, they begin to understand, okay, that play ends in AI rather than AY. Or snake has the A split E sound rather than the AY or the AI sound, okay? So in phase 5, we are concentrating now on alternative sounds and some complex sounds. For instance, you have the the IR for girl, okay? You also have the U for glue, for blue, okay? So these are where you have the complex sounds, and you might want to spend more time here trying to solidify this group of sounds so the children can understand when to use them and when not to use them. So this is your phase 5. Now moving on to phase 6. Phase 6, again, we don't have any sounds. You're not teaching any sound in phase 6, but phase 6 is more towards spelling. So now you are trying to make sure that the children are able to use what they've learned in phase 2 to 5, and that they're able to use them in their writing effectively, okay? So phase 6 is more focused on spelling. In phase 6, you are looking at past tense, you are looking at suffixes, you are looking at spelling long words, you're also teaching them skills on how to find and learn difficult bits in the word, how to break word apart, the syllables to help them with spelling. You're practicing spellings. You're also helping them to be independent learners. And then, as I said, you're learning the suffixes and the prefixes at this point. So basically, there's an element of grammar going on in phase 6. Now, what do I mean by suffix? So suffix are a group of letters that you add at the end of a word, which changes the meaning of the word or changes it into the action of the word, so present or past tense. So for instance, you have the ed, okay? So if I have a word move, ed to that word, it changes it to moved, right? So you have move, you add ed, it changes it to moved. Children need to understand how and when to use this. You also have the ness, the ness suffix. So if I add it to the end of a word, if I have dark and I have ness, if I add them together, it makes darkness, okay? And then you have the prefix. So prefix are the group of clusters of letters that you add at the beginning of a word. So you have, for instance, you have the pre. If I add pre to cook, I have the root word cook, and I add pre to it, it changes to pre-cook, or yeah, so it changes to pre-cook. So it might also change the meaning of the word, okay? So rather than knowing that you have to cook it fully, you're pre-cooking it. So it changes the meaning of the word. Or if I have the on, which is the prefix, and I have the root word kind. So if I add on to kind, it becomes unkind, and it changes the meaning of the word. So it's in phase 6 that we begin to teach these skills, as well as helping the children with their spelling, especially when it comes to how to use different sounds, different graphemes in writing that might sound the same. Now, year 6 is mainly taught in year 2. Okay, so phase 6 is mainly taught in year 2. Now, this does not mean that some schools don't. Some schools do it, okay? It depends on the cohorts of children you have. But in reception, they'll probably do the phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and phase 4 of phonics in reception, and maybe the beginning of phase 5. Now, when they get to phase 6, and when they get to year 1, then they will do the phase 5 and the phase 6, okay? So because the phase 5 needs more time because of the complexities, so you might find out that children might do phase 5 in year 1 and then some elements of phase 6, but then you have phase 6 mainly in year 2, and it carries on all throughout year 2. You are solidifying the phase 6 of phonics. So here you have it. These are your 6 phases of phonics. And again, I've explained how to teach them. You teach them in order, so you don't skip anything. And as well as the phases, don't forget that you're also teaching the common exception word as well, or the high frequency words, so that they can read those when they see them in books. So there you have it. So those are your 6 phonics phases. Please, if you've learned something new, do not forget to leave a comment. If you've got a question, please leave that in the comment section below and I will address that. Now, in my next video, I'll be explaining some of the key terminologies that you need to understand and you need to know to be able to teach phonics effectively. If you haven't seen the previous videos in this series, please go back and watch them to help your understanding and to help you progress in your phonics knowledge. Okay, do not forget to like, subscribe, and share my videos, and please turn on notification bell so when I upload, you'll be the first to hear and the first to watch the videos. And definitely I will see you sometime soon. Bye.